Hey everybody, welcome back. We have made it to video 11. Can you believe it? I mean, we're over halfway there now, all right? We're on the downhill, but we really are digging deep in all these various topics to deal with our finances. And if you're just now joining us, then you got a lot of stuff that you should go back and watch. But what we're doing is we are going through From Debtor to Better, the details of debt and how to get out. I'm pretty much going in order of the book, and you don't have to have the book to go along with us, although it is helpful. And even today, there's a lot of content that's in here that I won't cover. But what I am going to cover is tackling debt. And this is going to be a two-part video because I want to go today over the basics, the overview of how you can go about tackling debt, how you can approach it in some ways that work, in some ways that people will try, and just stuff like that. I will briefly go over my 5 steps, which is the focus of our next video, but today I want to focus specifically on just an overview of what to do when you're trying to get out of debt, because obviously the details of debt and how to get out, that's part of the book title. You knew this was coming. All right, now homework from last video, because we talked about insurance. Again, the reason we did that there is because an overall picture of your financial situation needs to include some safety nets. So I gave you 3 homework pieces. Number 1 was to ask yourself the question, are you overinsured or underinsured? 2 was, why do you have the insurance you have? Answer that question for yourself and understand all the different insurances that you have. Why do you have them? Should you have them? Shouldn't you? Etc. And then number 3 was really to take action, and that is get quotes on the various coverages that you don't have that you think you should, or consider declining, reducing, or just eliminating altogether the coverages that you don't really think you need anymore. So it was really to take action on your insurance situation. I know that sort of sounds like a making it fit in the just, square peg round hole kind of a situation, but really what you need to understand is what we're trying to accomplish is a good overall financial situation, and insurance has to fit with that. As you try to figure out what you're going to do with your debt, then again, we're looking at safety nets, because this right here, when you're doing the whole debt elimination, when you're fighting hard to get out of debt, this is where it either makes or breaks what you're going to do when bad stuff happens. Because the moment you say, you know what, I'm going to get out of debt, some big expense is going to come along. The moment you decide to set up an emergency fund, something's going to blow up. The moment you commit to living on a budget, something's going to fail. I mean, it's just the way it works. Welcome to the life. I mean, welcome to life of being an adult. Sorry, it's just the way it is. So today, let's talk about debt. Let's talk about how to tackle debt. And there's all kinds of stuff that we need to understand. The family verse for our family and the way that we approach debt is we don't want it. Okay, the family verse that we have in our family is Romans 13:8, and I would encourage you to go read the entire thing. Romans chapter 13 talks about living under authority and understanding who's in charge and living under the rule of the law and those kinds of things. And then you get to Romans 13 verse 8, and it says, "Owe no man anything except the continuing debt to love one another, for he who loves another has fulfilled the law." Now, translations vary a little bit, but the gist of it is this. There are all kinds of things you should and shouldn't do as a citizen, as a person, as a human being with people around you. Debt's not a good idea. And it doesn't just mean monetary debt. It means all kinds of debt, whether you owe someone a task that you've promised, or a chore that you want to do for them, or something that's just been on your heart. Owe no man anything except the continuing debt to love one another. So always act out of love. Don't owe people stuff. So debt, monetary debt, is a part of that. And so our approach to debt is pretty straightforward, but it's not about math, okay? The one thing that we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on is math. I talk to people when I do these big classes and all this stuff about the fact that if you can do very basic, like 3rd, 4th grade math, you're golden. If you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you are golden. Or if you got a calculator, it's not about the math, because if it was about the math, a lot of you wouldn't be in the situation you're in, right? Think about it. A lot of people have these 25% interest rate credit cards or worse, or they've got a terrible title loan that they're under, and all this stuff that is just financial silliness, but that's where they are. So this is not about math. However, what we've talked about up to this point is it is about behavior. In fact, I wrote this little booklet that I use when I teach classes oftentimes, and you can get it on our website, humorousHomemaking.com/shop. It's not about money, and that is the title of a book that's all about doing a budget and how to live on your income and a few other basic topics. But the whole point is, it's not about money, it's about behavior. That's the point. So we really need to work on the behavior, not the math. However, you do need to understand the math, okay? So you need to understand some of the terms. So when I teach these classes, I always make sure that people understand what an interest rate is, or what interest itself is, what an APR is, those kinds of things. If you don't understand what that is, shoot me a message. I mean, I've defined it in my book. You can look it up online or whatever, but if you don't understand what interest is, or what it means when they say 5% APR, or what any of those terms are, look them up, and if you still don't understand, please shoot me a note. Let me help you through that, okay? You need to understand what's going on. A very simple example is, and I'm very much oversimplifying, but stick with me. If I borrow $100 at a 10% annual interest rate, or APR, then at the end of the year, I have to pay $110. That's it. $10 is interest. Now you say $10 is not much, but 10% interest over time grows and grows and grows because it compounds. 110, 10% of that is 121. And then 10% of 121 is 132 and change, and it keeps growing, and eventually what you will find is that you can amass an immense amount of debt just because you didn't understand the interest. You can have this massive payment for a house, a car, or anything else just because you didn't understand how interest works. So please understand all of that, all right? I'm not saying it's not important. Understand it. That's all I'm saying, all right? So let's jump in a little bit more to a few of the different methods that people will often approach when they're trying to get out of debt, because most people have more than one debt. If you say, hey, I have debt, I'm trying to get out of debt, what's my strategy? Well, I teach a strategy that I call the 5 simple steps. We'll talk about that in a lot more depth in the next video, but for today, I will go over each of those steps as we wrap up. But for now, I just want you to understand that everybody wants to know, well, okay, I'm ready to get out of debt. What do I do first? Well, obviously, you want to make sure that you know what your debts are, so you need to get all that stuff together. That's why we talked about a budget already. And then the next thing you got to figure out is, in what order do you pay them? Because if you continue paying minimum payments on all of them, you're not going to make any progress. So you want to make minimum payments on all of them and then pick one to really attack, right? Or pay extra on all of them to pay all of them off a little faster. Or anyway, there's all kinds of different approaches. One of them is, and a very common one, and one that I actually promote, is the debt snowball. That's a debt, not necessarily, but it's primarily made popular by Dave Ramsey. And it's basically you put all of your debts in order based on their balance, the total amount that's owed, from smallest to largest. You pay the minimum payment on everything except the smallest one, and then you attack it with a vengeance. Every extra penny you can throw toward it, you do. I sort of like that approach, because what happens when you do that is you pay off that smallest debt, and guess what? You never have to touch it again. So let's say you have 10 debts that are standing out there. Again, we'll just order them smallest to largest, and I look at that like, okay, I got 10 bad guys that are coming down the alley and want to do me harm. Which one am I going to fight first? Well, guess what? I don't care which one goes away. I just want fewer of them to deal with. So I'm going to knock out that little one first, go on up to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And that's the same principle. The other thing is, it gives you a nice win. So you look at that and you say, you know what? I never have to fool with you again. Visa, you are out of my life. Whatever the case may be, whatever the debt is, I don't care. Just, I picked on Visa. Sorry, Visa. But whatever that debt happens to be, you order them from smallest to largest based on the total amount you owe. You pay the minimum payment on them all, and then you attack the smallest one with every extra penny you can throw at it until it's paid off completely. Then you go to the next one. That's the debt snowball. Pretty simple. Another one is, people say, well, whoa, Barry, that debt snowball thing doesn't consider the math. Well, remember how I said this is not about math? But the other really common scenario is you look at the interest rates on all the various things that you owe, and you arrange them based on highest interest rate down to the lowest. Now, mathematically, that one does make the most sense, because when you order something by the highest interest rate, that means you're paying the most interest, throwing away the most money. So if you get it to go away faster, then yeah, sure, it makes more sense mathematically, because you're saving the most money. However, what happens if your biggest debt also happens to have the highest interest rate? You may be 3, 4, 5 years before you pay off any of your debts, and that's depressing. If somebody said, Barry, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go on a diet, and you're going to lose 50 pounds. I don't really need to lose 50 pounds, so let's back up. Barry, you're going to lose 30 pounds. 30 is probably okay for me. So, Barry, you're going to lose 30 pounds. Now, here's what I want you to do. Every day, I want you to get up and get on the scale, and then I want you to exercise, and I want you to eat right, and then the next day, get up, get on the scale, and I want you to exercise, and I want you to eat right. And at the end of 2 years, you will weigh 30 pounds less. You'll get up that next morning, and boom, you'll weigh 30 pounds less. I got to put in 2 years with no change or no significant enough change to notice, and then 2 years later, voila, it's done? No thanks. Whereas if somebody said, Barry, you're going to lose 30 pounds, here's the way I want you to do it. I want you to get up, and I want you to exercise, and I want you to eat right. And once a week or so, get on the scale, just see how you're going. And every week, what you should see is a slight decrease until eventually, guess what? You've come down a pound. That pound is gone. It's never coming back. And then the next time, that pound is gone. It's never coming back. And time over time, you continue to decline on your weight until, guess what? That 30 pounds is gone. That makes a lot more sense to me. And that's the way weight loss works. We all know that. But when you look at the debt snowball, it's the same kind of approach. When you looking at the interest rate only, you oftentimes are just, yeah, you're saving a little bit of money from the math standpoint, but it's not really something that you're going to notice that you're making much progress. And guess what? You're more likely to give up. You need the emotional win. So I don't like that version of, ordering my debts, but guess what? Some people do. I want to let you know about it. The third way, and this is one I sort of chuckle at because it's a little funny, is they put it in sort of like a pain scale. So which one of these is aggravating me the most? Which one of these is just the one I'm mad at? And that's the order they put them in. Okay, that works too. That way it's purely emotional. You're like, listen, Visa, since I've been picking on Visa, I don't like you. The people what I talk to at Visa are mean to me. Their customer service is bad. I've had that card and then blah, 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 just whatever. That one's first. You're going down. And then the next one that they're most mad at. And the next one they're most mad at. I don't care. That method works too. But recognize that you need to have a method and a system for getting rid of your debt. Now, again, I teach the debt snowball because when you order them smallest to largest, think about those bad guys coming down the dark alley. I just want fewer of them. So when I pay off that smallest debt, it's done, it's gone. I cut up that card and I move on. If it's the car, then guess what? That car's paid for and I never have to worry about another car payment, provided that I do the things that I ought to by saving money toward the next car, which we'll talk about that in another video. You see my point. Put them in order, smallest to largest. Now, last thing I want to cover, and I'm just going to touch on it here because that's where we're headed. We are going to be headed into the idea of how Barry teaches you to get out of debt. Truly how Barry says, I think this is the way you should approach debt. I use 5 simple steps. I even came up with a course one time, 5 simple steps and all the tools you need to get out of debt. It's not complicated. It's not, when I read you the steps, it's not going to be something that's earth-shattering, but guess what? That's the point. It has to be simple. As Stacy likes to say, if it's not simple, you won't do it. And she's right. If it's not something that you can say, oh, well, that's easy, just follow the instructions. So here they are. Step 1, cut expenses. As you've heard me say, if you've been watching these videos, the math of your financial situation is pretty straightforward. It's income minus savings minus expenses equals 0. So when you look at what you can change, those are your variables: income, savings, and expenses. Those 3 things, that's it. So cut expenses. So when you look at all the bills, that's why we did the budgeting piece of things first. When you look at all the bills that you're paying and all the expenses that you incur, how much of those things can you cut and still live reasonably? I mean, we're not talking about living like a pauper unless you have to, but cut all the expenses you can cut because that gives you the most income to work with on your debt. Step 1. Step 2, maximize your income. See, we're going to cut debt and cut expenses and increase our income, and that does a double whammy effect. Not only are you having more income to work with because you don't have them tied up in expenses, we're also doing the extra things that we can to make more money. So when Stacy and I were getting out of debt, I started doing little odd jobs on the side. Stacy started doing some speaking engagements. We started doing all kinds of things, anything that we could do to make some extra money. We were selling stuff on the side. I was doing some woodworking for hire. I was doing some construction stuff to help. I was just anything and everything that I could do to make extra money, and so was Stacy. So we were doing all that we could to bring in more money because, listen, it's a season that you're really, really fighting to get rid of your debt. So cut your expenses. You don't need cable TV. You don't need fancy internet. You don't need fancy stuff. Get rid of the fancy stuff. Keep the bare minimums. Increase your income by working more or doing other things to make money. And guess what? That will work out to your benefit because now you have the most money to be able to throw at that debt. Third, and This is important. Cut expenses, maximize your income, get current on everything. Now, some of you get to skip this step. If you're not past due, if all of your bills are paid current, meaning that you are perfectly on time with all the payments, they're not saying that you've gotten a late fee, they're not trying to call you and hassle you or anything like that. If you're current with all your bills, you don't have to worry about step 3. However, if you're past due on any debts, you do have to worry about that. We'll get into more of those details in the next video. But get current on everything, so that way you're at a 0 level playing field. You're not having to deal with late fees. You're not dealing with collections calls, all that. So get rid of those first. Get them current first. Doesn't mean you don't make them go away entirely, just bring them current. 4th, use the debt snowball. Order your stuff smallest to largest by the entire balance that you owe. Pay the minimums on everything except that smallest debt. And then here's the last one, and most people don't give this advice, but I'm going to, and I'll tell you in the next video why that is. Make a call every time you're ready to pay something off. So you're making payments, you get a bill and it says that you owe $110. I'm ready to pay that bad boy off. I can do that this month. This thing is going down. Well, guess what? If you will make a phone call instead of just paying that, writing that check, if you'll pick up the phone and say, you know what, I've got the money and I'm ready to pay this thing off. If I pay it off right now today, just go online and make the payment right now, would you waive the last late fee, or would you waive the last month's interest, or would you, whatever, just ask them, will you give me a discount? And we'll talk more about that in the next video, but make a phone call every time you're ready to pay something off. I can tell you that usually the 5 to 20 minutes that you invest on that step right there will save you $30 to $100 or more dollars every time. Now, let me back up, 90% of the time. There's a few times you're like, no, I'm not changing a thing. But that phone call, it is amazing. And I used to work in credit card collections. If somebody asked, oftentimes we'd say, yes. And it would save them $35 just like that. Or they would say, hey, can you waive the last month's interest if I pay you? Sure. And right there would be $50 of interest or whatever. That's the last step that I teach. See, simple. Cut expenses, maximize income, get current, use the debt snowball, and make a phone call when you're ready to pay something off. It doesn't need to be hard. So I'm going to wrap up there by giving you one homework assignment, and it's a super simple one because we're going to lead into the more in-depth approach to why those 5 steps work. But here's your simple homework assignment. Think about all the debts you have, get them all together. You've hopefully done this already when you did your budget, but get together all the debts you have and decide, am I going to pay them off using the debt snowball? Am I going to order them based on how much they aggravate me? Am I going to order them based on the interest rate? Just decide what your approach to the order of the debts that you're going to pay off is going to be. Simple assignment, won't take you long. Just sit down, compile all the debts that you have, all the stuff that you can pay off eventually, not your electric bill, but the actual debts, order them in some way. Decide the order you want to pay them. That's all you got for homework. Pretty simple stuff, but it's important, all right? Next video, I will be back and we'll talk about the 5 simple steps, and we'll talk about them in some detail so you can really understand how they work. That's all I've got for you today. Have an awesome day, and we'll talk again soon.